Silence. A crystal tumbler rests on a white marble counter, haloed by morning light. A small hand nudges it to the edge, then over. Glass scatters like bright rain. Orange juice runs in slow, sticky veins toward a pair of careful shoes. A rag stills above the spill. The child's face doesn't change. He waits, not for comfort, but impact. Somewhere down the corridor, a door closes without echo. Cut to black. In a house built to impress, a child learned that attention arrives fastest when something breaks. The marble floors were polished to a glow. The staircases swept like ribbons, the mirrors taller than people. Wealth had ordered the world into symmetry, but inside that symmetry, loneliness pooled in the corners. An 8-year-old named Ethan moved through that space like a draft through a closed room, felt more than seen, cold where warmth should have been. He lived among objects that couldn't love him, tables that tolerated dents, walls that absorbed noise, and sofas that kept their posture no matter who sank into them. When adults appeared, they often wore the rehearsed smiles of professionals trained to reassure without listening. They came with plans and timetables, chore charts and reward systems, words that sounded like care and felt like routine. They left with quiet apologies and the kind of relief people don't confess. The boy's father made fortunes out of stone and steel, stacking glass against sky, proof that vision can be purchased and framed. His mother drifted through appointments and events, a figure in expensive silhouettes, showing up for pictures, but not for bedtime. Between them, love became a duty with a line item, outsourced in weekly contracts and measured by receipts. A nanny is a solution on paper. In practice, she's an introduction to rejection if the agreement starts with distance. 7 nannies in 3 months. Some endured insults, some endured thrown food, some endured the startling calm that followed a scream, the way the boy would simply watch, as if testing gravity on promises. None of them endured long. They walked out carrying tote bags, tears, and the realization that a job description can't account for a child who refuses comfort because comfort has always packed a suitcase. Into this world, a cleaner arrived. Her name was Amma. She came with quiet shoes and a slower pace, a way of moving that didn't try to conquer a room. She carried a bucket, a folded cloth, and a kind of attention that made even the smallest mess feel worthy of care. She did not bring advice. She did not bring discipline strategies. She brought the habit of noticing. Amma's work began in the spaces care had skipped, the corners behind the plant that pretended to be alive, the banisters smudged by small hands, the glass doors that remembered nose prints. Her hands were practiced, wiping, wringing, lifting, rinsing. She understood the difference between what shines and what's clean. She understood that order without tenderness is another kind of mess. He watched her first as an intruder, a new adult who would set rules and become a target. But she set none. She did not tell him how to behave. She did not ask for a hug or a word or any proof that he could soften. She simply looked at him the way you look at weather, something to prepare for without trying to change. The staff called him sir sometimes, by habit or fear. She called him child without ownership, the way you name a sunrise without claiming it. In a home where voices arrived like instructions, her quiet was a new language. She didn't use it to keep distance. She used it to let space breathe. The first weeks were not kind. He tested as he always did, because testing had become his only reliable ritual. An insult is a flare. If no one runs toward the fire, can anyone be counted on when the house really burns? He threw food. She wiped the floor. He pushed a vase. She gathered the flowers and put them in water. He hid a shoe. She set the other one neatly by the door. Where he expected a storm, a mop showed up. Where he expected a speech, a cloth pressed into a spill until it stopped reflecting light. He learned the sound of her hum before he learned the shape of her face. It was low and steady, a tune with no insistence, the kind of melody that gives a corridor more dignity. She hummed when she lifted chairs, when she swung open a window, when she paused at the darkest corner of a room as if darkness deserves respect. It wasn't a performance. It was breath with a tune. One morning, he poured bleach into her bucket. It was calculated, the way an experiment is. Watch the reaction, measure the consequences, decide whether control exists. The house manager found the acrid smell first, a bark of alarm already forming. But before the reprimand could spill, Amma took the bucket, poured it out, and rinsed it clean as if the day were just beginning. She did not scold the boy. She did not ask why. She changed the water, wrung the cloth, and returned to the floor as if the point of a mess is not to establish fault but to restore the surface. He waited, tense, eyes fixed for a sign that power had shifted. None came. Instead, a new variable entered, the possibility that harm would not be answered with harm. That possibility unnerved him more than punishment. Punishment is predictable. Mercy can feel like silence. Silence can feel like abandonment. But this silence was different. It was not empty. It was deliberate. She wasn't ignoring him. She was refusing to let the worst thing he did become the only thing she saw. He slowed before he softened. The tantrums shortened at the edges, then in the middle, like a storm discovering it can run out of water. The house noticed before the parents did. Mornings began without shouting. Spoons returned to drawers instead of clattering to floors. The kitchen felt less like a stage and more like a room where breakfast could finish. Staff traded fewer glances. The dog slept through noon. In these quieter hours, he watched her like a student who doesn't want to admit he's in class. On the kitchen floor, he sat with his knees pulled up and eyes level with the horizon of a wet tile. He tracked the movement of her wrist, the rhythm of the mop, the minute reflections that chased the cloth and faded. He measured the distance between her footfalls. He listened for the breath between one swipe and the next, a breath she seemed to use to decide how much pressure a surface can hold. He did not understand the song, but he recognized what it did. It stitched the house into one piece. It made the echo shorter. When she left a room, the room did not feel abandoned. It felt settled. There are houses that pride themselves on cleanliness and houses that hope for it. This one demanded it, but all its shine had not prevented resentment from forming beneath the gloss. Children see the undercoat, the residue behind the polish, the hollows under the steps. They feel the draft that takes the place of embrace. They learn to reflect back what surrounds them, like mirrors with feelings. This child had learned distance as a defense and offense, both. If he could make every adult prove themselves under pressure, he could at least predict who stayed. When Amma refused to pick up the rope in his tug-of-war, he had nothing to pull against. Something shifted in him, not with a hug, but with a pause. He asked a question he had never asked, not in words, but in the way his body held still. What happens if I don't push? He waited. She worked. She did not fill the moment with advice. She filled it with steadiness, and in that steadiness he found the outline of safety. The father noticed late. He entered rooms like a verdict, strapped to a phone, tethered to decisions that outlast daylight. His gaze measured cost before it considered meaning. His anger was seldom loud. It was tidy and fast, like a gate that swings shut on well-oiled hinges. He expected a hierarchy he could count on. He expected touch to be transactional, smiles to be serviceable, warmth to be optional. When he found his son leaning into the cleaner's sleeve, head resting there the way a tired mind rests on the least dangerous thing in sight, he met not a problem, but an offense. His reaction did not shock the staff. It confirmed a posture the house had taken for years. Certain people are for labor, not comfort. Certain bodies are acceptable at a distance, not at the center. Certain hands can touch floors but not be touched by children. Rules like these are not printed, but everyone can read them. The moment they are spoken aloud, they sound as weak as they are. The cleaner stepped back. She did not defend herself against disgust. She let it reveal itself. Shame does its own work when given air. But shame rarely moves fast enough to keep a child from crying that night. The boy discovered, in the space between his need and his father's fear, that love can be punished. It is a brutal lesson. It makes many people numb. It made this boy alert because, for once, the warmth he recognized had been challenged by someone other than himself. What happened the next morning was not grand. It was not defiance for the sake of attention. It was clarity. The child climbed onto a chair beside the cleaner and placed his lips on her hand. The gesture was quiet and exact. It said, "This is the safest place I have found." It said, "Comfort can be chosen." It said, "I recognize care even when I am told not to." Children often speak best without words. Adults often understand least when words fall away. Time stretched in that kitchen, as if the house had inhaled and forgot how to let go. The father's face grew tight. The manager held still. The cleaner's eyes filled, not because she had won, but because something in the house had remembered how to be human. Healing is not victory. It is recognition. It was shared in that moment by the person who needed it most and the person who had learned to deliver it without permission. In the months that followed, routines changed, not on schedules or chore wheels, but in the looseness of shoulders, in the way footsteps slowed before corners, in the way a voice drops when asking a question that deserves attention. The boy ate more than he threw. He slept more than he yelled. The stares felt shorter. The dog wagged without checking faces. Small things are how big things announce themselves without spectacle. Amma's departure was not a plot twist, but a continuation. People who carry dignity into rooms seldom stay to see their own impact measured. She left a note that required no reply. Love is learned, even in silence. Keep learning, child. It was not addressed to the boy alone. Houses can learn too. So can those who build them. Years have a way of sanding edges. The boy became a teenager who had to redecide every year whether tenderness is worth the risk. Then a man who understood that initiatives are easier than apologies, that paying for programs is simpler than changing habits, that statements are cheap if they don't cost your comfort. He was handed a company with a name like a surname and a reputation like a crown. He altered what he could: procurement lists, vendor codes, hiring pipelines, safety briefings that began with respect rather than liability. He asked harder questions in rooms that once only asked what a view is worth. He learned to look people in the eye and not through them. On a website, words appeared beneath a logo. We serve people, not class. It is a clean line. Clean lines can be lies. In this case, it wasn't one, because it was written by someone who had been served not by a company, but by a woman who chose care over power. Policy followed pedagogy, and the teacher had carried a mop. Inside his office, a photograph sits framed in inexpensive wood. It isn't centered among awards. It is tucked where his eyes land when meetings end and the room goes quiet. A woman in a cleaner's uniform stands beside a mop. The light in the picture is ordinary, the smile unpracticed. It anchors the room. It keeps the past from becoming a performance. It keeps the present from pretending it arrived unaided. There are viewers who will recognize themselves in the boy, those who learned early to break what they couldn't bend, those who pushed first so they wouldn't be pushed later. There are viewers who will recognize themselves in Amma, those who have walked into rooms where their presence was allowed but their proximity was policed, those who learned to carry their own dignity when none was offered, those who understood that kindness without borders is not weakness but skill. There are viewers who will recognize the father's reflex. Recognizing it is how it loses strength. If this story speaks into a silence you've known, you can help it reach someone who needs it. A simple action, a like, a comment about the person who taught you gentleness, a subscribe so more of these stories surface for those who search in the dark, moves the narrative outward, not as marketing, but as witness. In telling this, we do not pretend that one child's relief repairs histories. We do not confuse a softened household with a just world. But we honor the mechanics of change. It starts in a room, in the choice not to escalate, in the way a hand steadies instead of points. Justice requires structures. Healing requires gestures. When the two touch, communities remember themselves. You may ask why the cleaner did not confront the insult head-on, why she did not take the father to task. Some fights are essential, some are traps. In that house, the most radical act was to refuse the child a familiar war. By declining to be a prop in his cycle, she introduced him to a different story. Harm can be met with boundary, not violence. Respect can be demonstrated without performance. Care can be consistent without being naive. Children learn from what we repeat. She repeated steadiness. Consider the spaces you move through. Offices that smile without welcoming, schools that speak fairness while rewarding proximity to power, families that buy experiences to avoid intimacy. In each, a person like Amma is often present, cleaning, organizing, smoothing the fabric. It is easy not to see them. It is easier to assume their role is small. But the grain of a culture is set by those who touch it daily. If you've been held together by hands that don't appear in photographs, say their names in the comments. Stories endure when they are carried by many voices. Some will want a larger ending, a grand reconciliation between father and son, a public apology, a moment that fits neatly into the length of a shareable clip. Real change tends to resist our timelines. What mattered is what the boy practiced afterward, choosing whose words define him, choosing which gestures to repeat, choosing how to organize rooms so that warmth is not a special event. Power is the ability to set the tone. He learned tone from a song, not a seminar. For those thinking about what to teach the children near them, consider what the cleaner taught without lecturing, that people are not ranked by their proximity to wealth, that a task done with care is not small, that a no delivered calmly is more durable than a shout, that a body marked by work is not lesser. These are not slogans. They are daily decisions. When children see them, they can copy them. When they copy them, they grow into adults who do not need to be watched to behave. There was a time when the boy believed connection could be withheld as punishment. Withholding is control in disguise. He met someone who was not there to control him or be controlled by him. She was there to do her job with a completeness that gave the house back its shape. That completeness taught him that presence does not have to be leveraged. It can simply be given and received. A hand can clean. A hand can be kissed. Both can be sacred. The house remains large. Wealth continues. The father sits inside his own learning curve. Some days he moves faster. Some days he does not move at all. None of this cancels the morning in the kitchen. Moments like that do not ask permission to persist. They exist in the muscles of those who were present, guiding future decisions like a compass you don't have to look at to follow. If you've watched to this point, you've carried this story through its quiet turns. If the pacing felt slower than the world outside, that was intentional. Slowness is how detail becomes visible. Detail is where human beings rediscover one another. If you want more spaces like this, stories that do not rush past the moment when a life bends, subscribing tells the platform that time like this matters. It tells us to keep telling them. Imagine the cleaner's note as addressed to all of us. Love is learned, even in silence. Keep learning. Learning means asking who cleansed your memories, who mops the floor of your anger, who kept you from hardening when it would have been easier to close. It means noticing who in your life made a room feel safer by entering it and deciding to become that person for someone else. A final image. A grown man locks his office late. He switches off a row of lights that used to stay on through the night. In the dim, the framed photo catches a stripe of street glow. He pauses, not to admire himself, but to measure his day against the standard in that image. Did I treat people as if they were more than roles? Did I clean a mess I didn't make without needing a witness? Did I allow tenderness to exist where my fear once lived? The questions are not dramatic, they are reliable. And so this story sits with you, not to prove a point, but to offer a practice, to tidy your memory of what strength looks like, to adjust the camera so that the person on the edge of the frame is finally centered, to remind us that the first person who showed us safety may not have been assigned to love us, and did anyway. If this brought someone to mind, write their first name below. If you want others to find a story that handles pain without spectacle and hope without pretending, pass it on. You are not boosting numbers. You are building a room where courage feels possible. This is our Black Diary. We gather moments like this and set them down with care so that somewhere, a child who has learned to break can learn to mend, and a person who mends for a living can feel at last seen.